So the Donald Trump clown show continues, and the best way to think about Trump is he's like that guy in high school who claims he has everyone's phone number. He also claims that everyone is calling him all the time and everyone wants to be his buddy. But when it comes down right down to it, you never see anyone with Mr. Trump. And turns out also that sometimes his claims are so crazy that people have to come out and make public statements saying basically Trump's a liar, stop saying things about me, and this is where we start. So this is the headlines today. China rejects Trump's accusation that it violated trade truce, okay, so basically calling Trump a liar. Trump hits back against Trump claims that it broke trade truce, and then you got something like this, which even gets more wild. Trump and Xi are likely to talk soon about trade, though no date has been set, and that's according to Hassett, one of Trump's people. And if you guys saw my last video, basically it was Lutnick, it was Besant, and then now Hassett are coming out and say, oh, everything will be fixed with the trade war between China and the USA. Just Trump and Xi have to talk. But that's why I mentioned with Trump being the guy in high school claiming that everyone wants to talk to him and he's got everyone's phone number. This phone call is not going to happen, guys. And no matter how much they claim that Trump's a great business person, all that you need to look at is sort of what are the end results. And the end result at the moment right now is China's basically saying, I don't want to do business with Trump. And so where do we go from here? This is where it's really tricky. Then you got stuff like this. You got other Trump minions out there. There's a headline. China accuses Hegseth of touting Cold War mentality and provocative speech, right? And you're probably curious, what exactly is China saying? That's why I want to go with you guys here. China hits back at Trump, saying U.S. actions severely undermine trade truce. Now, this trade war is affecting the entire world. And this is a period where Trump is not only weakening ties with China, but weakening ties with pretty much every country out there. Starting fights with Europe lately, starting fights with Canada. And what is China up to? They're saying here, I'll read it with you guys. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce struck back at Trump's remarks Monday, so that's today, saying that while China had implemented and actively upheld the deal, so if you don't know, the US and China met in Geneva. They basically agreed to keep talking further, essentially what it was, and they were going to try to go back to what it was before Trump started the trade war, okay? And then basically Trump kept, making more demands, and now we're in an issue where they're, whether they're deciding how closely ties they want to be. The U.S. is saying, okay, before they were saying, we don't need China whatsoever. China's like, fine, okay, fine. And then now suddenly the U.S. is kind of like, well, we don't really want to break up with China. Let's try to see if we can work things out. But the problem is Trump keeps accusing China of said things. Take a look at stuff. So it says here, the U.S. has introduced a series of, quote, discriminatory and restrictive measures against China that severely undermine the agreement, right? So the U.S. is doing all these policies. The ministry said those measures include AI chip export controls. So, the U.S. won't send chips to China. That's one thing. Reported pause on sale of chip design software to China. That's another. And the announcement of U.S. plans to revoke visas of Chinese students. So that's going to be pissing off all kinds of families in China, and often very powerful families. So this is sort of what's getting personal. Like, hey, you just revoked my visa of my kid that's going to school in the USA. Just imagine how you would feel about that. And if you were a politician, I mean, you certainly want to say something here. You also got this. This is a quote here. Instead of reflecting on its own actions, and this is China to Trump, it has falsely accused China of violating the consensus, which is serious distortion of the facts, okay? China firmly rejects these groundless accusations. This also comes from China. The ministry urged the U.S. to, quote, immediately correct its erroneous practices and vowed to take, quote, strong and resolute measures if Washington insists on acting unilaterally and continues to harm China's interests. And China's interests can be all over the map. And I want to be clear on this, because whenever you bring this stuff up, people say, oh, Chris, you're so dumb. You work for the Chinese Communist Party. Guys, I actually want the USA to be in a strong position. And no, I don't work for the Chinese Communist Party. Frankly, that's ridiculous. The biggest problem with China, I want to make it really, really clear. is the freedom of speech. That is a massive problem in China, and oftentimes the state media just comes out and says propaganda nonstop. So you do have to be careful when you go through this stuff. But unfortunately, the U.S. Is controlled by Fox News and Trump and all those people, and they're putting out a bunch of propaganda nonstop. So I don't want you to necessarily give the implication that we should be rah cheering for necessarily either the Trump regime or the Chinese regime. I'm just telling you guys what they're saying, and unfortunately, the situation that we have, you have these two. What's the right word to say it? We'll live it this way: people that we don't necessarily want to cheer for, duking it out. Yet they're the ones with the keys to the kingdom. So I hope that's clear, guys. I know this gets to be messy when you go through all of this stuff. I'll just say this: the U.S. and China are both reliant on each other. Is it a security risk if you become too reliant on one country? Sure, I can certainly agree with that. So I understand this point of view of like, hey, de-risking, that's part of what they've been saying in the Trump administration. However, it doesn't necessarily mean you just, cut it off immediately, go cold turkey, as say Trump's language would mean. And also from China's point of view too, you don't necessarily want to, rupture all relations with the USA. The problem is, though, is that when Trump is in power and he makes all of these insane demands, he's unreliable. He changes his mind all the time. You may make whatever agreement, he'll change his mind, then he'll say bad things about you. If you try to do, any sort of meeting in public, he'll scold you and yell at you, etc. And I'll just tell you guys, the people in China aren't stupid. They can see what's going on in USA. And I think the big one, and it's not just China, and people in Europe see it as well, is that when the American courts are basically ruling that what the stuff that Trump is doing is illegal, they're just like, well, you know what, we're just going to wait it out. I mean, why should we react or do business with someone like Trump when he's doing a bunch of illegal stuff, and the American system may, remove him or neuter him, and he'll become a lame duck in the next, year or so when midterms come around. So, in my opinion, foreign countries are probably just going to wait it out. But you never know. The Trump people, could cave even further and then just go all the way back to the beginning, and this whole thing becomes a whole bunch of much ado about nothing. I mean, that stuff's hard to predict in the future. But I will say this: the markets are souring on Trump. You can see the dollar going down, and the big concern really is borrowing costs. If the Trump budget and tax plan comes out, we're going to do massive deficit spending. And what if, say, China and Japan start dumping bonds, frankly, U.S. debt? Could the UK start doing that? Yeah, why not? I mean, any number, and it's not just countries, major hedge funds, etc. Could start dumping U.S. debt as well, and then it sends borrowing costs soaring. And then Trump essentially needs to, essentially issue a bunch of bonds, basically U.S. debt, to keep everything funded, because frankly the numbers don't add up, and you got real problems here. This is a time bomb ticking, and with Trump at the helm, I don't feel confident about it. I'll just be honest, and that's sort of how the markets are feeling as well. When you read through some of the language that Trump and China are saying, you can kind of see that it's not really making any progress. Here's some more. I'll just read some more details because it's a lot of changes all the time. That's why we go through it every day. For example, it says China on Monday accused the United States of breaching the 90-day trade truce agreed by the two world's largest economies. After Donald Trump said it was Beijing that had totally violated the agreement, right? So that was Trump's language. And then also you have the Europe stock market is going down. Trump doubled the steel, and I think it was aluminum imports from, I believe it was from 25 now at 50. Again, it's hard to keep track exactly where we're at. And then the war with Ukraine and Russia. They were supposedly doing peace talks, but the headlines that I was seeing today that there was like major drone attacks and attacks on bridges in Russia. So these headlines are hard to figure out because, like, I'll just read it. It says Ukraine and Russia to meet for second round of talks as attacks escalate. Like, it doesn't really make sense. Like, okay, like you just just did a major attacks, and then now you're talking peace. Like, I don't, it doesn't make sense. But that's sort of the world that we live in, and unfortunately, I don't think it's going to get any better with Trump in power, because he's setting the whole world in chaos and unstable. If you want to be a leader in this world, you want to be essentially you could call it the rock, right? A good way to put it, like the foundation, like the the stable thing that you can count on, and then other people then will pitch a tent, make camp around you because you're the base. If you're not that, where are people going to look for leadership and stability? Which markets are they going to look for? At the moment, if I had to bet, I think power is going to shift over to the Europe, China, Canada, etc. Because the U.S. is an unreliable partner, unfortunately, under Trump. So that's my opinion on this stuff. We'll keep tuned and keep abreast. So do appreciate your time and share your thoughts, and I'll catch you on the next video.